Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wild Chat Facts. Today's episode is going to be all about orangutans. Maria has the commemorative colored shirt on. Mar, how's it going?
I honestly wanted to wear orange. I love orange in honor of orangutans because they have the coolest, brightest hair that I think a mammal has. Now, if you think of squirrels, there's some squirrels that have the same color. It's not a bad hair job. But I did find, besides the fact that there are only like three species of orangutans in a small
Mhm.
area, I did find something really cool in the preservation arena.
Okay.
So there are many zoos that are now conservation clinics and hospitals. That includes Tampa and a couple in Cleveland. There are several zoos that do this
Hmm.
and that are there to allow for more animals to be able to recuperate them from extinction. So, but in order to prevent an incredibly smart animal from being bored and causing a havoc, you have to have programs. You have to have enrichment programs. And one of them is called Apps for Apes. And it's an orangutan outreach program that uses iPads to help orangutans be mentally stimulated. And so it's for mental enrichment. And this was unveiled in 2010. And he was thinking to give the orangutans to play, and they love them. Apparently, according to research, they've been loving this. They generally stick to children's games, but also want some more mature, like elder adult
Hmm.
documentaries that the orangutans enjoy watching.
Okay.
So yeah.
So this was clearly pre-iPad because this was in the 1980s. Uh, but there was an orangutan named Ken Allen, and when he would get bored, he would just escape. He would just he's like, hey, I'm bored. He was at the San Diego Zoo. He got out like three different times in the 80s, and he would just stroll around the zoo, looking at the other animals, never act aggressively, just looking like a normal person, just roaming around the zoo, which was bad enough. But then he became the instigator. And all the other animals started getting ideas, and then they started having other animals follow his lead, and basically they started escaping also. Because clearly they wanted to roam around the zoo and see the other animals that they could hear, but they couldn't see, or they could smell, depending on the animal. So yes, pre-iPads, they would just go for a walk.
They'll go roaming around. I actually found that about Ken and I loved it. I think that shows you how intelligent they are. And
Hmm.
they did a research in the University of Michigan that concluded that cats have better memories than dogs. And cats' memories of dogs apparently only last 5 minutes, but cats can last 16 hours. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is because, according to the research, cats can have better memories than orangutans. Who would have
Okay.
thought? Because
Okay.
orangutans are such high thinkers, and because of the opposable thumb, they can get away with anything and away
Yeah.
of
I think one of
everything.
the interesting pieces there, though, too, is in when you think about it with humans, sometimes the most intelligent people don't have the best memories because their minds are going everywhere.
Good
So
point.
sometimes just that creativity or how fast your mind works actually limits your memory because you're not taking the time to actually like burn it into your memory, essentially.
Good
So it
point.
could be a little bit of aspect of that too.
Love it.
So anybody that has traveled around Southeast Asia or more it's more common in like Singapore, Malaysia, that particular area. There's a very very popular fruit. Well, it's popular and unpopular. It's called the durian fruit. It's
Oh,
kind of large, yellowish green, spiky. It smells so bad. There's literally signs around cities and in hotels that and in like elevators that say no durian fruit allowed. Like it smells that bad. But it's one of those weird things in nature where it smells horrible, but it's supposed to taste really good. I couldn't get past the smell to get to the taste. But apparently orangutans have because it is actually one of their favorite fruits to eat is the durian
oh.
fruits. And we were talking about the orangutans are only in the two areas, which would be Borneo and what's the other one, Mar?
Sumatra.
Forget. Yes, Sumatra and Borneo. So again, it's
And there
kind of
there are
in that.
actually three of them. There's another little area. I I think I have it or maybe left it out.
Okay. But basically, it's in that same like Indonesia area, because that would be Sumatra, and then you've got that whole region is very well known for durian fruit, and the orangutans love them.
Now, did you know that the name orangutan actually means forest person? And it deserves an explanation. The Indonesian and Malay language share the words orang, which means person, and hutan, which means forest. And that's where the name of orangutan comes from, not because it's orange. So it doesn't have any composition of orange. Anyway, doesn't have that. So that's what it means. But they also employ two specific words for orangutans. So if you ever go to Malaysia or Indonesia and you want to sound like a native, you can say mais or mawas. And that's also specific words for the forest people.
Yeah, because if you're going to break it down, since hutan means forest, they would basically be called orange forest. If you use the orange as an actual color, that'd be orange forest, which doesn't.
I just thought it sounded like human with a T,
Yeah.
just to make it fun.
Yeah, kind of. Okay. So it's okay. It was actually my very next fact. That's why I couldn't find it on my sheet. So wild orangutans are found in only two places on Earth: Sumatra and Indonesia, and the island of Borneo. And unfortunately, these areas are also very big for palm oil. And unfortunately, the trees that orangutans like to hang out in are said palm oil trees. They spend most of their lives in the trees. And because of that, the deforestation and everything that comes along with it, because palm oil is used for candy, chocolates. So there's
Everything.
around Halloween, but also cakes, margarine, cosmetics, biofuel, lots and lots and lots of other stuff. So that's the specific threat to their habitat, just on top of deforestation in general, just so people kind of know what's going on with them.
Yeah, there are actually certain products that for a while, because that area was the only area that had the bigger plantations of palm oil. So like I wouldn't eat them. Like if you said palm oil, I wouldn't eat it. But now there are other areas, including in Colombia, they're producing palm oil that are more environmentally friendly, because it's not necessarily a forest, it's more of a savanna. Not that there are animals in the savanna that are not worth keeping. It's just they're less attached to the tiny region and they're more mobile.
And it's hard because it's a crop that became very valuable. And when you're talking about people that live in regions of the world that don't make a lot of money, it's hard to give them a hard time for like trying to take advantage of whatever resource they have to try to better their lives for their family. So it's a hard balance, as with everything. But this is not a, we're not going to get too far into the conservation stuff. It's important to us, but we want to make sure that we deliver the orangutan facts also.
Also because we want you to fall in love with the animal, and therefore you will fall in love and want to take care of. I mean, that's just scientifically proven.
Well,
but there is something really interesting about orangutans. Are they meat eaters or seed spreaders?
Oh, I already found this one. They're big fruit, like 90% of their diet is actually fruit, or 95. It's some real high number, which would then make them seed spreaders, because you eat that much fruit and you're going to get rid of that much excess.
Well, they actually have found, to the contrary, very small percentage. They never thought that orangutans, because they're such peace-loving, slow, kind of just chill, they actually are capable of hunting, and they were observed tracking down lorises. Loris is a small parakeet, and dispatching them before eating them. So they dispatch the cutest loris. I take that back. It's not lorises.
Loris like a monkey creature.
Slow loris. Well, when I read loris, that's a bird, but slow lorises.
A slow-moving bird. Yes, I got you. I
saw where you. Slow loris is actually a ape-like creature, a very arboreal creature.
They got really big eyes, and they're adorable.
They are adorable, and they're actually poisonous too. But anyway, they actually have found them. They are. Oh no, I have another fact for later. I just wanted you to realize, you guys to realize that they are not all loving cutie. They have their dark side.
Other apes hunt too. I mean, they found in other ape populations that they do hunt and eat meat and stuff. So just because they do eat so much fruit, it's definitely within their. I mean, they're primates. So
And we saw
they
that
are.
cows will eat birds too. So we learned that
Yeah.
in the cow video and the deer.
I think we keep finding that. We've talked about that in a lot of videos. Animals will eat what's around sometimes because we were talking about a carnivore that actually would eat fruit if it was around because they were watching other animals eat fruit, so they ate it. But it doesn't give them the nutrition they need for their, biology.
Exactly.
That's a whole different thing. So during the 19th century, during construction in Paris, it's kind of hard to do construction in Paris. It's such a historic city. It's been around for a long time. So when they start digging, they find lots of weird stuff. So they got down to the underground sewers as they were starting the construction, and workers found a lost medieval dungeon. They found dungeons. They found jewels. They even found the skeleton of an orangutan that had previously escaped from the zoo. So they had it on record that he escaped from the zoo, and he somehow ended up in the sewers. So you hear all the jokes about the human-sized rats and the crocodiles in the sewers. There actually was an orangutan in the sewers in Paris back in the 19th. Well, I don't know when. They found it in the 19th century, but I don't know when he escaped the zoo and ended up down there.
Yeah, because Paris had for a while some of the animals will roam around, and during wartime they would release them, so you just never know.
Yeah, there's stories of places in Italy, like the people that
Florence.
Yeah, where they would just there was giraffes walking the street, like drinking out of the fountains and stuff like that. Yeah, that would have been really cool.
That would have been amazing. But they actually have. I mean, these creatures are mischievous. They actually found pirate orangutans. Pirate. They were stealing canoes, and so one guy's like, "Okay, I'm gonna tell these apes that they can't steal my canoe, so I'm gonna fill it with water so it looks like it's damaged." Oh no! Oh no! They actually started moving it sideways in order to release the water, and they rocked the canoe, spilled the water, and then they started floating in the surface again. And they use their lower arms to paddle, and they just kind of pivot according to how they want, and then they abandon the canoes.
Orangutans, their arms are actually longer than their body is tall. Like they're massively long arms and extremely strong. So they're like perfect paddling animals.
Yes.
All right. So since we're on the topic, there was a zoo in Nebraska called Henry Dorley Zoo, and there was an orangutan named Fu Manchu. I'm rhyming, guys. This is not meant to be a poem. And he had repeatedly escaped his cage in the zoo. And so they were trying to figure out how he was doing it. But he would get out, and they couldn't find any way he got out. And then they realized the door was open, so they were trying to figure out how he was opening the door. Every time he'd get out, they would search him. They would find nothing. They would put him back in, and he would get out. Well, it turned out that he had fashioned a key out of wire. And every time that they were patting him down, essentially, to see how he was getting out, he would just stash it in his mouth, like in his cheek pouch. So he would just hide the wire, the key he constructed out of wire in his cheek pouch every time, and so he could keep using it.
It's clever.
Yes.
Now, males, most species, there has to be protection of territory. It's just the way it is. Deer stay within their territory, wolves do. Well, orangutans will protect their territory. And males, when they're fighting, they charge at each other and break branches. Like they will use tools. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't scare them away, they'll start biting each other. Like they will try very kindly, like, hey, just go away. Like raise your chancla to throw, flip flop. But don't, but they will do that. And it's just very interesting to see because orangutans males are so big compared to females. Usually in the mammalian kingdom, in the mammals, there is a dimorphism, and in these cases, extremely noticeable. Yeah, because they can be up to several feet tall.
Exactly. Sexual dimorphism is that differentiation in size or proportion between males and females in animal species. But it's interesting because we've got a video coming up in the future that I'm going to do, and it's all about mirrors and reflections. And I've got a video, even though I usually don't like telling Mara what's in the videos, but it is a very primate thing. They put a mirror in an area, and gorillas came by, and monkeys, and that they almost all reacted the same thing. There was trees around, so they would break a tree branch and try to do that show to show big because they would rather scare them away than actually get into a fight. That is a very primate behavior. Um, it's very interesting to see, though. They put this mirror in and they would see themselves, think it was another primate, and then they would puff up.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see that video.
It's a good one. It's a good one. So we've told stories in the past about people finding skeletons, and people would find like elephant skeletons, and that's where like the myth of cyclopses came from, because the area where their trunk is they thought was an eye. And so there's kind of pieces that have been found that nobody really knew what they were. Like the science of bones and prehistoric animals is very recent, to have enough of them to be able to put things together. So in the past, people would kind of just make stuff up. So we kind of know they used to sell like ketchup as a medicinal agent, and people would just kind of sell all these snake potions. So they did the same thing for discoveries. So in 1912, there was something called the Piltdown Man, which was supposed to be the missing link in human evolution. At least that's how it was sold to the public. But it really was just a skull of a medieval human with orangutan jaw and chimpanzee teeth, and they just took a whole bunch of primates and they threw them into one skeleton, like one skull, and they made something. And because nobody had any point of reference, they believed it for the longest time before science came along far enough that they could go, no, that's clearly this, and that's clearly that, and that's clearly this, and good try pre-super glue for having put that together. Good job. But definitely, but that was the Piltdown Man. And there's been a lot of those throughout history where people have taken, some of the most famous dinosaurs are actually not real. Because in the early days of the dinosaurs, they would take pieces and they were competing against one another to find all these new species. So if you could take a leg bone from something else and then say it was something else, then you got to name it. You got all this fame. And so there was an era of a lot of fake prehistoric skeletons, and the Piltdown Man was one of those.
Well, that also reminds me of P.T. Barnum in his museum. He had a collection of rare things, and he had a centaur and a mermaid, and he was literally just made up animal parts. And he did that as a show in his early days of the circus. But when we talk about cryptozoology, it's a very interesting subject, because cryptozoology is the study of ancient animals that they almost look made up. Like there is just the understanding of the behavior or the location and habitat of creatures that may be made up or that existed in the past. So that's that study. And they actually apparently named the Gigantopithecus, which was supposed to be a giant ape of late Cenozoic Asia. The full-grown men were like 10 feet tall and as much as a half a ton of weight. So talking about misconception, they actually believed that the orangutans were actually Gigantopithecus. So before they discover the orangutans, they're like, oh my gosh, we're finding Gigantopithecus or Bigfoot. If you think about that.
That's the closest guess right now for Bigfoot is Gigantopithecus is actually what it is, if it is still alive, or some very close offshoot of it. But yeah.
But we also talked in the sloth video that because ancient sloths were ground dwellers and they could walk on their 2 feet and they were gigantic too, people confused them.
That's a fringe theory. I shared that because it was a fringe theory, but I thought that it was interesting that there are some philosophies that it could be a giant sloth for Bigfoot, because sloths only poop once a week, and so that's why you're not finding any Bigfoot droppings. And they so there's a little more of an out there philosophy where the Gigantopithecus one is the most commonly accepted. If Bigfoot does exist, he probably is a Gigantopithecus or some very recent offshoot of it. Okay, let's see. Oh, I always thought this was adorable. For the first 4 to 6 years of their life, 4 to 6 years, everybody, infant orangutan actually hold on to their mothers as they move through the forest and search for fruit. They nurse for a really, really long time. The rule of thumb with animals is the more time they spend in the womb, the more they need to develop to be, but then you still have to take care of them even more after they're born. It's almost counterintuitive. Sometimes the less time they're in the womb, they're an animal that kind of pops out ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that mix, but orangutans are one of those animals, like humans, where spend a good amount of time in the womb, and then once they're out, they cannot fend for themselves. They need to be cared for several years before they're able to go off and do their own thing.
And that's what makes it a negative growth for them, because
Yes.
they can reach reproductive maturity at the age of 10. The
Mm-hmm.
gestation period is 9 months. They
Mm-hmm.
give birth to a single baby. And because they stay together for so long, it just takes very long for them to reproduce again. So they give birth to every 6 to 8 years, and they only live 30 years in the wild. That's it.
Yeah.
And then you
Their
have this
reproduction.
problem with the environment and how hard it is for them to live harmoniously, because there's a lot of poaching. So
Yeah. I just found it interesting. Their reproduction is basically equal to ours. Time in the womb, time in between kids, all that kind of stuff, but they live half to a third of the amount of time that we live. They live to 30.
well, they have children every 8 years. A woman can have every year if she wants
I
to.
think orangutans can. They just don't tend to. It's the average is once every 8 years. It's not they're only capable of it, but like you said,
Exactly.
the way their societies are built, the lack of options and the mating and everything else, you've got to find someone with some nice cheeks that you find attractive before you decide you want to do that. And that is
Exactly.
the thing, guys. I wasn't joking. That they do find as males mature, they get these cheek pouches, and that's one of the things a lady orangutan looks for in her man is a good cheek pouch.
So they can hide the wire in order
So
to
they,
escape.
exactly. So if they ever get arrested, they're able to pull the wire out of the cheek pouch and get them out of the back of the cop car. Uh,
That's just smart orangutan that Fu Manchu.
yes, yes. Who's up, Mars? Is it me or you?
You.
Okay. You see these things, guys? They're called opposable thumbs. Orangutans, they got these, but they always have opposable big toes also. So they actually can use that. It's very, very advantageous for mobility and grabbing. And so they kind of don't have hands and feet. They almost have like 4 hands because of that extra set of opposable thumbs.
And because they are tree-dwelling animals, they really need it, but they also are classic because they sleep like 95% of the time. They spend it in trees, eating, sleeping, traveling, like they travel from tree to tree, because it's also safer if there are any predators in the ground or anything. So they rather stay in the branches. It's definitely better for them. But they're classified as semi-terrestrial, in spite of the fact that they can climb and stuff, but they're called semi-terrestrial because they could move in the ground.
So along those lines, and we've talked about how much they use tools and how smart they are and everything else, they're actually incredible engineers. They're very big animals, and they spend all of their time in the trees, which means you make your bed in the trees, which is easy if you're a lightweight monkey or some other animal. But when you're the size of an orangutan, it takes a little bit of engineering. And not only are they able to make a bed that can fit them in the trees, they actually do it to a pretty extraordinary ability. They layer different sticks and leaves to actually make a cushion within the bed so they can almost build themselves a mattress. The way they weave things together and construct it, they even at the end put a big frond or leaf over the top for the rain to stop it from raining on top of them. So they don't just mess around. And we're talking about them building these nests 30 to 60 feet off the ground. And we talked about sloths being built for falls. Orangutans aren't necessarily built for falls. So if you're going to sleep 60 feet up in the air, you have to build something that you believe in. And they build a new nest every day. They pick and they'll use elements of their previous nest. They're not weaving from scratch, but it's not like they make one and then they just spend a lot of time making a fantastic one because that's where they're going to be for the next year or 2 years. They are constantly making new nests and building these things. So, but again, everyone's got to have a hobby. We play video games and do whatever on our downtime. They do a lot of nest building when they're just kind of relaxing and they're not getting food or trying to find other friends or people that might like their cheek pads. Yeah, exactly.
One interesting thing is we actually share with orangutans, we humans share 97% of our DNA with them. So they said that that makes orangutans, which branched off their common lineage with humans about 13 million years ago, our most distant relatives among the great apes. The closest one, they're the most distant. The
Yes.
closer relatives are actually chimpanzees and bonobos, and that's 98.7%.
Hmm.
And between them is about 99. So they're chimpanzees and bonobos are really close, but we're like the first cousin basically. Yet
Yeah.
gorillas and humans share 98% of their DNA. So we're very closely related to it by a few points.
Yeah. And another, we were talking about reproduction and stuff, and another one of the big deals and why it's so far in between orangutans reproducing is they're pretty solitary animals. The groups that are there are usually mothers and children's, or so you have a lot of like, if they're without children, the females kind of have their own thing going on, and the males that aren't like the alpha of the group have their own thing going on. So there isn't large groups to procreate to begin with. So that's another thing that's kind of holding back the population growth is they're very solitary. They like to kind of do their own thing. And I don't want to say until they're forced into a group, but until a situation arises that then is more beneficial to be in
Yeah.
a group, then they'll be in a group. But their first choice is solitary.
Because when you see them at a zoo, like I went to the Tampa Zoo not too long ago, and the females had their babies, and there were several of them with young babies, and some of them
Mm-hmm.
were 3, 4 years old. So you can tell they were still young, and they were all together. And
Yeah,
you always think, oh, we see them together. They're four. They like to be together. Well, like you said, it could be out of necessity. But when it comes to learning, females do tend to stay closer to their siblings to help with the babies. So
yeah,
so they do have that, but most of the males tend to be very big loners.
exactly. Exactly. So,
Mhm.
and I think that's the case with a lot of animals, guys. Unfortunately, it's great that we get to see animals at zoos, but a lot of times what we're seeing isn't really what happens in nature. We had talked about in the sloth video how there was this misnomer that sloths slept like 15 hours a day and all this stuff. Well, they did the study in a zoo. So once they started studying the sloths actually out in the wild, they only sleep like 9.5 hours a day, which really isn't that big of a deal for an animal that we used to put in the category of animals that sleep the most. So what Maria's talking about is exactly spot on. It's great that we get to see these animals in the zoo, but the behaviors that you see or the groupings and things like that aren't necessarily what takes place in the wild. Um, and I've heard that
And that's
story
why you
so
need the iPads in order.
exactly.
And like if you go to a zoo, like I like to talk to the caretakers when I go to a conservation place because I always want to know how are you keeping these animals safe or how are you keeping them entertained so they don't go crazy, they don't do the pace that most
Yes.
animals who are in distress do. The problem is once they're rescued and they have that pacing, you're not gonna get them out of that. That's super unfortunate. But
Mm-hmm.
you just see them pacing, and that has to do because most of them got rescued, which is what
Yeah.
happens now in many of the zoos. So it's really cool to talk to them and ask them, okay, how are you stimulating the animals? And just to learn from them because there's such a wealth of information to try to keep the species alive that they
Yeah.
also part of that mental health is, is
Yeah.
stimulation, mental stimulation.
Exactly. Mental health is really, really important for animals in a zoo. I mean, most research for most animals say that animals live longer in a zoo, but there are certain animals we talked about in the elephant video. Elephants live significantly less amount of time in a zoo if they're born in the wild because the ranges are meant to be longer and they're not getting the exercise they normally get and they're not getting the camaraderie of even if there's one other elephant with them or two or so you'll hear that a lot. The elephants live longer in the zoo, but not always. Mar, I don't have any trivia questions for the day. Should we head out?
Let's do it.
All right, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the orangutan facts video. I had a lot of fun with this one. Actually, it was harder to find stuff, but I enjoyed doing the video. I think we got in a more fun conversation opposed to fact. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Let us know if you liked a little more storytelling and stuff like that. I think that's good feedback for us. We appreciate it. Click the subscribe button if you haven't already. Patreon subscribers, we are heading on over to the after show. See you there in 30 seconds. Mar, see you there in
Bye.
30 seconds.
See you there.
We